Welcome to Petgevity, the podcast that gives you the best advice to help your pets live longer, healthier lives. Imagine this scenario. You're at home enjoying a quiet afternoon when you hear your neighbour leave the house. Moments after the front door slams, a new sound starts to filter through the walls. It's their dog, barking, whining, scratching, and banging itself against the door. It's clear the dog is struggling with separation anxiety. This continues for as long as the owner is away. It could be a few minutes or a few hours until eventually the front door opens again. Instantly, the noise stops. The dog is overjoyed to see their owner return, while your neighbour has no idea about the stress their pet was experiencing only moments before. Today, I'm joined by Adem Fehmi, a dog behaviourist and trainer with over 26 years of experience, helping owners understand and resolve behavioural challenges in dogs. Together, we'll explore the often hidden condition of separation anxiety, learn how to recognise the signs, and discover simple, effective ways to help your dog feel safe, calm, and secure when you're not there. Hello, Adam. Welcome to the Petgevity podcast.
Hi, Fab, and thanks for having me.
We're going to start with some quick fire questions, and I would like you to give just yes or no answers. So question number 1. Can dogs with separation anxiety engage in self-harming behaviours?
Yes.
Is it easy to miss signs that your dog is experiencing separation anxiety?
Yes.
Can training practices eradicate separation anxiety in dogs?
No.
And this is the full sentence question. What is the biggest misconception about separation anxiety in dogs?
Certain breeds may be experiencing separation anxiety, but in actual fact, all breeds can.
Okay, that's really, really useful. Separation anxiety is a term a lot of people will be familiar with. Perhaps some of the listeners will have experienced it themselves, most definitely. However, I think fewer people really understand how the condition might apply to their own pet. So let's start with the obvious basics. What is separation anxiety in dogs?
That's a really good question, and one that I have to answer a lot. So separation anxiety is when dogs become anxious, worried, fearful about being left alone. We might see various outcomes here, such as urination, defecation, being disruptive, pacing, panting. We could be getting restlessness, and even dogs escaping. Others might not make much fuss at all. There may just be slight whining, scratching at doors. We could be getting dogs that are in very extreme cases where they may self-harm.
Why do dogs get separation anxiety? Where does it all start?
So if you imagine, like us, dogs are social mammals. So it makes sense that we stay with the team, the family, and of course, much of our lifestyles and going to work, leaving, shopping, we're asking many dogs to do the unnatural. We're going shopping, you sit there in the bed and chill. So we've got to help dogs understand what we want. And today, Fab, we're asking a lot of dogs, cafes, pubs, Airbnbs, doggy daycares, these sorts of things, going with walkers, going with other people. So we're asking a lot more of dogs today too, which is important to acknowledge.
And out of curiosity, what are some of the worst incidents you have seen of separation anxiety?
That's a really good question. And when you've been in dogs as long as I have, I've seen some extremes. And one that comes to mind actually, when I do sort of talks to, whether it's veterinary nurses or vets or students, is a little dog I saw who was a terrier cross, Lakeland cross, and he was born during the pandemic and was of working origins from terms of the terrier. And he would react very, very aggressively towards the owners if they tried to leave. So he would go to the door and would bare his teeth, potentially had bitten the owners. So they always had to have somebody in the home with him. So one owner could leave, but not two. He was way more hyper attached or focused on mum in the household than he was dad. And these guys had been working from home, and they hadn't actually set him up to be left while they were in. He was always on them. So we had big problems with aggressive behavior when they tried to leave. This was an extreme case and was causing a lot of stress between the couple, the owners, right? Because we couldn't go for a meal together. It was starting to really disrupt life. So I would say that was quite extreme from a dog behavioral point of view, but also the owner's lifestyle point of view. It was really stressful, Fab, and it was a lot of work to help create balance there. And these are behavioral issues. It's not quick fixes that we may see on TV or social media. This is working with the mind. It's working with the individual owner, the environment, positive reinforcement always, very important. Other extremes, I remember I'm 43 now, so I've been in dogs a long time, but as a lad working in boarding kennels, 16, 17, I must have been at the time. I remember somebody bringing in a male German Shepherd, actually, and the bitch had come into season, so the female that they lived with, they kept her at home, and they lived the other side of a village. They dropped the dog off at the kennels, absolutely fine. He's a little bit agitated because he'd been separated from this female dog. Obviously, he was tired. He knew she was in season. He actually, these were old school kennels back in the day, wooden built, broke out of the kennel one evening, jumped over a 6-foot run in the kennel, out of a paddock which adjoined the kennel run, through the isolation unit. We have an isolation unit, and out, and managed to get home. I mean, that was extreme case of anxiety to get out of that context. So of course, at the time, as a lad, you're thinking at the kennels, he just wants to get back to his family, but really that was a dog full of adrenaline, very agitated, to go through all of those lines of gates and doors. So I would say that was a very extreme case too.
So there's a term that I've heard before, which is the hyper-attached title. And I really want to know, why do some dogs hyper-attach to their owners or caregivers?
So hyper-attachment can occur for a number of different reasons. It can be because of genetics. Some breeds are more likely, like herding breeds, for example, may want to be with their owner, their caregiver, or other animals within the household, right? But we might also see that the way we behave can create hyper-attachment, for example. So it's important to look at each individual case when we look at hyper-attachment or shadowing. Some people may see a dog follow them to the toilet. He follows me everywhere. We hear a lot of these sorts of things. He won't let me out of his sight. He lies at the top of the stairs or in the way. These are things that can be seen with a dog that has anxiety. But hyper-attachment, again, can happen for a number of reasons. But think of things like genetics. Think of things like the way we behave. And also think about the life stage of a dog too. We might see hyper-attachment happening at later stages in life because dogs lose senses. They're not as aware. Or with a puppy, for example, that's just left its team, that the litter and mum.
Is hyper-attachment or hyper-attaching a bad thing?
Not necessarily. It depends on the scenario. So we might want hyper-attachment for dogs that are protecting livestock, for example, right? Or maybe somebody who is relying on the dog for protection. In many parts of the world, this may be something that they don't worry about. But of course, for the situations and the way that we live with dogs, we often want them to be alone at times. We need to go to hospital visits. We need to go out with friends and family. So we need the dog to stay at base. I call it a safe place.
I think that's really valuable, and something that I want to circle back on that you've spoken about several times already is certain breeds. And so, are some breeds more prone to separation anxiety? It seems that you're leaning that way.
Yeah, I would say I've seen separation anxiety over the 26 years of working with dogs in all breeds, all life stages, all energies. But there is definitely certain genetics that would be more alert, more aware. For example, some of the working breeds may be more prone to separation issues. They're more aware of an owner leaving, coming in, going. So they may be more alert to us going out the door, whereas a lower energy breed may not be so. May let that go, even if it's slightly agitated. So we might see the more extreme behaviors with the working breeds, the higher energy dogs. But it's again about understanding the type of dog we've got and understand that we can even get the separation with a low energy dog. But I definitely see more cases with the working cockapoo crosses, these sorts of breeds that also have affection orientated tendencies, the toy poodle, the Bijons, these breeds that we've bred to be with us, right? Doesn't make sense to sit on your own while we go to work.
One thing that's clear is individuals matter, but there is still certain breeds that could mean that you can be more aware of certain types of behavior. So that's really, really helpful. One of the main challenges with separation anxiety in dogs is that the symptoms often only occur when the owner isn't present to witness them. Do you think a lot of separation anxiety goes unnoticed and untreated?
Yes, I would completely agree with that. Many dogs I see, these owners are not aware these dogs are anxious. When they go out, these dogs will lay by the door. They'll lay on a bed. They'll say things like their shoes been moved. But no, they're fine because we don't have any damage to the home. It doesn't mean the mindset's right. And often the owner will see the anxiety or the fear of being left when they change context, like they stay in an Airbnb, they go to someone else's house. Maybe somebody gets a partner, new partner comes along, and the dog can't be in the same position. We might see then it's a bit more obvious to the owner that there has been some anxiousness. Signs that a dog might be anxious may include things like scratching doors, okay, so damage, chewing around those areas. And some people are very, very precious about their home and their doors, and that's a big problem to them if the dogs do that. Others will be like, yeah, he scratches it, but then he just goes and lies down. So I can see it on the camera, it's fine. And of course, if we've got Chihuahuas, Yorkshire Terriers, these guys are not going to be flicking door handles open. But if we're seeing our Shepherds, our Huskies, they'll be opening the handle. When they get anxious, they're knocking the line, as I call it, the door or the stair gate or the puppy crate. And of course, they would be a problem because they can open a door. Yep. So we might be seeing little clues when we go to people's houses, like there's dogs' nose prints all over windows or paw prints on back doors. So it might not always be blatant to the owner, but we can see signs often of dogs being anxious when we're in, guys, not just when we're out. And that's really important. When we're looking at rehabilitating a dog that has anxiety or separation issues, a lot of the work is what we do when we're there.
Can separation anxiety get worse if untreated?
Yes, it can be exaggerated. So, for example, if a dog is lost, we might have anxiety with the dog, but then we lose another dog within the household. Or even house rabbits before. I've seen dogs become more anxious because the house rabbit passed, right? Because this is another being there when you go out. Or we might lose that house rabbit or another dog goes to a vet, and then we can see it be exaggerated. So yes, it can escalate, and it can escalate quite quickly. We might get more damage, more self-harm to the dog, or pacing or panting, urinating, defecating. If we move house, for example, it could become worse because the dog doesn't know the context.
I want to bring it back to a particular time that happened relatively recently that we hear about all the time, which is COVID. Did COVID impact the number or severity of separation anxiety cases that you were seeing?
This is a really good question as well that I get asked a lot. And when we look at COVID, what I feel is that a lot of people bought young dogs of the wrong energy. So let's say the working Cocker Spaniel crossed with the poodle. That's a totally different energy to a show Cocker poodle, right? Because this working Cocker is like Ronaldo energy. We're on the World Cup right now. To the show energy, which might be a lower league player, right? So people were buying the wrong energies as well, and the setups are different. So we might be seeing during non-COVID times, people are leaving younger dogs in puppy crates, let's say, and going to work, right? They do their little morning routine, blow the puppy a kiss, leave it in the crate. Dog walker's coming in at lunchtime, whatever, and the puppy might just cry out in the crate, let's say. Yep. Very weak, very young, and would just go to sleep. If you try to do that same process with an 18-month-old working Cocker, it could break out of the crate. They may have finished toileting training while they're working from home, and now the front door is the line, not the crate line. So I think the actual problem was not so much that people were doing different, routines were different, but I feel there's still anxious dogs non-COVID time. It's just there's a bigger population number, more higher energy dogs reaching pet people, because a lot of the gun dog breeds, a lot of the breeders of these dogs have dogs that are ready to match the market, whereas a lot of the pet dogs are neutered, so they couldn't meet a demand for the market. Does that make sense to you, Fab? So I think a lot of the wrong energies got into homes. The setups weren't there, and maybe have not always been there for these puppies. But I think we're leaving dogs in different life stages later on down the line. When everyone started going back to work, we're leaving older dogs, more powerful dogs. If they get anxious, there's more damage that can be created. And if they weren't setting their dog up while they were at home, and I'll give you a little example of that. If I'm sitting typing on my laptop, okay, if that dog's lying at my feet all day, okay, I'm not really practicing what I need when I go out. Yep. So it's good to set the dog up while you're home. We got a lot of dogs on people, that hyper attachment idea, that natural behavior, remember, to lie with the team. And then all of a sudden, woof, we're back to the city and the dog's sitting on its own. So it's a big blowout, really. So I think to answer your question, yes, COVID definitely has played a big role. It's changed our behavior, never mind dogs' behaviors. But I also think it's changed the way the breeds that we've got in the pet home, the life stages that we're seeing now. We're seeing a lot of dogs now that are middle-aged. I'm personally seeing better bred puppies now at the moment, lower number of puppies as a behaviourist and trainer, but better bred puppies. I can remember during the pandemic actually doing Zoom calls, and one day, Fab, I saw 4 working cockers with young couples that had new houses, bought these working gun dog puppies, one line generation back on a grouse moor, picking up grouse and pheasants, working 7-hour days. Then all of a sudden we're asking for them to sit outside a coffee shop and they're hunting a paving slab. So I think you can see why we could get anxiety with certain breeds and energies, because their energy maybe is not getting out in the right way. We're not appreciating genetics. But yes, the pandemic has changed things for dogs in general, owners in general, the pet market. I'm sure you've seen it within the veterinary consult rooms. There is different behaviors within working breeds, within pet scenarios. And I think some of these breeders don't understand what these working dogs are doing in daycare, or when they're on, I always say in the middle of a busy park where it's Darwin's nightmare. Frenchies, Chihuahuas, Great Danes, working cocker, whereas the working cocker in the gun dog scene might just see a few other gun dogs. So we're asking a lot of dogs in our crazy modern world. So COVID, to answer your question, has caused change. I think with separation, there's always been cases of separation anxiety. Of course, it makes sense. We're seeing more cases if there's more dogs. But I'm also seeing dogs where owners have gone back to work. They bought a COVID puppy and they're absolutely fine with it. They've got a good setup. And that's the key. It's setting our dogs up well.
Part of your job is to also reflect what's happening in society. And so certain breeds and also people's interaction and understanding of those breeds and what breeds we consume and buy does change. And so I really like the balance of, it's not the fact that it was just COVID. Lots of things about society are changing, and that's really valuable take home for everyone when making decisions about what breeds and whether or not they have the situation to set up the best for their pet. That's really, really useful. Let's move on to some practical advice for listeners. I'm going to run through a few different scenarios that can trigger separation anxiety, and I'd love to hear your advice for caregivers and owners. How can you prepare your dog to go to a kennel or someone else's home?
Really good question. So first off, when we're looking at going with somebody else, a carer or a kennel or a daycare, what we need to make sure is it suits our dog, right? So I've got children, I'm a dad too. We would make sure, I remember actually just after the pandemic, my daughter, she was born one day before the lockdowns kicked in. She didn't get on very well with the first the childminder. So lovely lady, but it just didn't work for us. So we adapted, we changed, we looked for the situation that may suit her. Very similar with our dogs. We need to make sure these situations are going to suit our dog. Okay, what's our dog used to? What enrichment does our dog like? What lures does it like, toys or food? And make sure that these guys can pick up with that. So that's what we're looking for. We're looking for a setup that suits our individual dog. Think what your dog's used to, and then what that kennel environment can offer, or what that daycare or dog walker can offer. So we might have a dog that, for example, does have a behavioural issue, and a kennel environment might be safer while we're away for that dog because it's enclosed. It's got pothole maybe that the dog can go in and out of calmly if it's a street dog that's just arrived. Or we might have a dog that maybe has separation issues, and going into a kennel may be very stressful because it's like a crate, whereas going with a daycare or a home sitter could help our dog. They could just become us, the base, and we get our 2-week holiday, and then we can work on our issue. So think about your dog, what your dog's used to, what issues your dog's got, not just this person's lovely. We need them to also understand our dog or the scenario it's going into.
What can you do if your dog gets separation anxiety when you leave them home alone?
Always go to your vet first. They will have local behaviourists that they know and trust. And what we can do is we can look at a number of things. Okay, and that's my job when I go into the home, is to look at how we're going to work within that environment. What life stage is the dog in? There's a big difference between an older dog that's anxious to maybe a young puppy. We might be looking at how we give enrichment to help our dog be less stressed. Okay, we might be looking at how we exercise the dog. There's a number of things, Fab, that we look at. How we are interacting with our dog when we're in. Might not be the way we eventually end up interacting with the dog once there's no anxiety. We might be changing things to get that result. So to answer that question, it's quite a complex thing to sort out separation anxiety, but those things of enrichment, exercising, training and playing with and bonding with our dogs, these are all going to be things that are important. But one of the big things, remember what I said earlier on about setting up while you're home. Practice makes perfect. And we've got to go at the dog's pace, little and often. Some cases we might even use a dog sitter or a daycarer while we go to work, so we don't create anxiety, and then we can start fixing it while we're in.
Well, it's a massive net of connecting pieces. What are your go-to enrichment style things for home? I know it's very individualized, but are there any very easy ones that, you know, your average caregiver can access?
Sure. So enrichment while we're away is very rarely toys like chase toys or fluffies. It's normally going to be things like food enrichment, right? So we can use food enrichment toys in many different ways. We've got rubber types. You'll all be familiar with toys like Kongs. We've got lick mats, snuffle mats. Okay, these are a group. I always break food enrichment toys into 3. So we've got rubber types, lick mats, and snuffle mats. We've got robust types too, like big clunky dice, the balls you'll be familiar with. These are not always good to help a dog settle because they're noisy. So they might be good on the grass in the garden. But inside, I like to use the rubber types. They might promote laying down. Licking action is quite soothing too. So I'll look at the individual dog, its physiology, right? There's no point giving a pug or a brachycephalic breed a huge clunky Kong. We will be looking at something like a lick mat. Okay, so look at your dog's life stage too. If it's very difficult, the toy, the puppy might turn it down. Okay, look at the value within the enrichment toy as well. So we might change the way we distribute scent. Scatter feeding can be good. But I think to answer your question on enrichment toys, pick the one that suits your dog best. And remember those 3 types, the rubber types, licky and snuffle types, and the clunky types. We can still do setups with the clunky types. We might not even be putting the dog behind a door or a gate. It might just be out on the grass while we do a bit of gardening. It's just getting the dog off us while we're there. So we can use all of these enrichment toys while we're in, not just when we go out. But they're very, very useful when we do go out to help the dog not be bored, may replace chewing of items such as shoes. Okay, so it can allow a dog to express natural behaviours while it's away from us. So can long-lasting chews.
Lots of food enrichment, and that's something I use very frequently in the vet practice as a start point before I end up deferring them to to people like yourself and like, go there, they know everything. How can you prepare your dog for someone new coming into your home?
That's a good question. So we might be looking at sometimes using a safe place as people come in, depending on if the dog is reactive or not. We might be using things like lick mats, scatter feeding when people come in so that we don't get jumping up. So we want to create positive associations. So food, toys, depending on the dog. I might see when I go round to a case that the dog, say, let's say it's a sprocker or a working cocker. It really likes its toy, its ball, its chase toy. We might use that. They might only use that in the park. We might bring it to the front door area so we can get the dog not jumping up, being worried, for example. So using positive association, maybe tools such as leads or safe places as well to get people in safely. Even in many cases, in some cases, we might be using tools like muzzles when we introduce to people coming in. So using tools, using positive reinforcers, these are the sorts of things we want to be looking at.
You've mentioned behaviour rehabilitation. What does it look like and how does it work?
When we're fixing many behaviors, fears, phobias, anxieties, aggression, is complex. And my job, I think one of the biggest things I've learned over the years is to actually help owners change their dogs very early on. Okay, I thought, okay, I get the dog scene. Worked in kennels, worked in vets, worked in groomers. I could read dogs, understand a whale eye or a lip curl. What I've learned over the years is that not everyone gets that. Okay, so and dogs' physiology varies hugely in the domesticated scene. From a breed point of view, we've got thousands or hundreds. So I think what we've got to be making people be aware of when we come to behavioural rehabilitation is that it can be a long road. It can take time. We can have one step forward, three back, and it's important that we have the right path. We are happy with the person we're working with to help rehabilitate. We've got a dog training centre here in Hertfordshire where we set up coffee shop scene, pub scene. We have bikes. We have livestock in the background. We have stooge dogs. We have people that are prepared to sit and be patient. So I set that up. So it works in many different ways. Sometimes we're just looking at working with the dog in the home, around the vehicle, around livestock, around prey. So we need to maybe sometimes block a certain behavior like prey drive, let's say, and then give it somewhere else to go. And that might take time building up that lure that we need the dog to now chase. So it works in many different ways, to answer your question, Fab. But we need patience, consistency, support. That's really important. And I'm always learning too. I've learned that people learn differently. They learn through watching, some learn through practicing, some listening, some watching other dogs do it. So sometimes I have to adapt. And I don't always keep everybody interested long enough, but I try my very best. It's really important that we in behavior, we keep up with the science. We try to keep learning. We're open as well. I do think I've learned with a lot of behaviorists, they're quite close, especially early in my career. And like you with your vet friends, it's great to talk. It's great to be open, to find out new little techniques. I mean, I learned one just the other day, or was it a year or so ago, just with watching a Danish behaviorist actually working with a Dachshund, and instead of putting a treat on the floor, using a spatula through a stair gate so the dog could lick at distance. And that's something you could use even for a vaccination at the vet's, bit of paste on the spatula. And just a little technique like that can actually sometimes change behavior for the better. So being open-minded, being patient, and understanding that sometimes it can take time.
I think in our line of work, the real work is working with the humans, ironically, despite the fact that we spend so much time with animals for various reasons and different, faculties and forums. And so a lot of the work that we do is about almost rehabilitating our view of the situation and also bringing the caregiver on along with that process. Should you wait until you notice signs of separation anxiety before taking action, or is it better to start preventative training earlier?
Prevention is always better than cure. That's the old saying there. You know that one, Fab. And I think if we can set our dogs up well, that is always going to help them cope with changes in context, staying in different places, which can actually offer the dog more. Because if a dog can settle in a safe place, we can create a safe place in an Airbnb. We might get a trip to the beach. If we can settle in a car, then it's less stressful. Settle at a cafe. So settling's not just at home. Anxiety can be on the lead outside a cafe. So in general, what we want the dogs to do is settle and learn to relax in many, many contexts. And it can actually give the dog, a more happy, fulfilled life in many cases. So prevention's better than cure.
Absolutely agree. And if you take one thing away from this whole discussion, is that prevention is most definitely better in a lot of different forums, as I'm sure we'll agree. As vets, we advocate for judicious use of drugs. And I'm not asking you as a vet, as a non-vet, to make any disclosures in that sense. But what's your experience with particular drugs, or do you think they're useful, and how have they been useful?
So many of the cases that I will see, if I've been referred to by a vet, they will maybe on something, on medication, various different medications over the years. Very rarely, if I'm honest, Fab, does a specific medication stop separation anxiety, right? We'll work alongside it. From experience, a long time ago, I remember in the kennel environment, they would be giving sedatives, the vets, to the dogs that were stressed in the kennels. And actually, I remember thinking, there was a case reminding me of two border collies that I was actually staying over at the kennels one night, and the vet had given them, I think it was ACP. Is that familiar to you?
Yeah, acepromazine.
And these dogs it did not touch them. So they were fighting these two when they got stressed going in the kennel. It's the first time they'd been there, looking back on it now. So I put one actually in with me to sleep in my bedroom at the kennel, and the other one was stressed. So we had to put both in the bedroom. Okay, so actually when they came in the bedroom, they just zonked out. So they didn't, the actual sedative didn't work in the kennel because they were so stressed. And then as soon as they came in with me, they just chilled, right? So it actually taught me a lesson, like, okay, if I have them in with me and then work them off me, it might help with the sedatives because they're more relaxed, so it might work quicker. But when they're really drunk, really scared, really anxious, these sedatives are not really touching base. I'm sure you've got sedatives at the vets that will knock a dog out completely, for example, but we're not looking for that. We want to change the frame of mind, you see, not dumb it down, I would say. So I wouldn't say that there isn't things, I mean, there's science in Adaptal that can help with reductions in anxiety, and they've shown that. But for me, I always look for the mindset change. And is that firstly, we want a vet check. Is the dog healthy? Is there anything wrong with it medically? If there isn't, then I wouldn't maybe touch the medication. I'd work alongside it. But I've not seen a vet give a pill yet and then the dog settle and the person can go to work.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's the exact way that I like to approach it. Please go and see, a behaviourist and someone with the insight to see what progress you can make. And, in these conversations, there's a huge amount of crossover that we see in other fields, particularly human medicine. And what we are really working with is a being that needs to be supported, and the whatever drugs we do or don't use help facilitate change, but they aren't the be all and end all. And I think a lot of caregivers do come in thinking that if we give this SSRI or antidepressant, that this will work and they'll be nice and calm. And actually the basis is what you guys do, which is helping relearn how to operate within the space, and the drugs help facilitate that. That is a really important take home from that. I'm sure you can agree with.
Yes, no, definitely. And then this applies when we get to fireworks season, thunderstorms. Yep, we need to be setting our dogs up to cope with these things. But of course, if we've got a random fireworks show next door, we might be looking at sedatives to help us get through that one night, right? But in general, what we're looking for is to get the dog more balanced around these things, and these things could help us out to break the ice on a very intense scene, if that makes sense to you. But of course, I'm not going to look for them long term.
What is the number one thing you want owners and caregivers to take away from this discussion on separation anxiety?
Look for the signs whilst you're in. So have a look at your dog. What we don't want dogs doing, guys, is being stressed. So we might see dogs that are stressed every day, the level of stress. We don't want owners to panic, okay? But look for the signs of anxiety. The things that we talked about, Fab, like shadowing, okay, pacing, getting stressed if we shut a door, for example, scratching doors, barking, panting, urination, defecation. Look for those behaviors. And sometimes it might not be necessarily very extreme, okay? And it's always good to just do your research, look at the science, talk to behaviourists and even your trainers. They will have experience and be able to help you.
I'd like to thank you, Adam, for being on today. There's been absolutely wonderful, and there's been a huge amount of valuable information. So thank you very much.
Absolute pleasure, and thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Fabian Rivers, and this podcast is brought to you by Petgevity. If you'd like to find out more about how we can help your pet live a longer and healthier life, the link is in the show notes. This podcast is produced by Flamingo Media. Thanks, and see you next time.